Estamos iniciando mais um Papo Supren, esse programa da TV Supren, União Planetária, que sempre entrevista pessoas que têm uma mensagem interessante para compartilhar conosco. E hoje nós temos aqui um instrutor, um professor muito especial, que é tibetano. Ele nasceu na Índia, mas é de família tibetana e foi educado na tradição tibetana. E ele vem trabalhando há muito tempo nessa área de educação. Ele é um PhD. O nome dele é Lobsang Tenzin Negi. E o trabalho dele é realmente muito interessante, que ele é todo inspirado e baseado nos ensinamentos do Dalai-lama. E ele vem conduzindo esse trabalho na Universidade de Emory, que fica nos Estados Unidos, já há vários anos. E recentemente, esse ano mesmo, ele lançou em Delhi, junto com a presença do Dalai-lama, inclusive, esse programa chamado Si, que é um aprendizado que inclui o social, o emocional e o ético. Então, é uma revolução na área educacional que está acontecendo e é fruto de um trabalho de vários cientistas, de vários educadores e religiosos em torno dessa tentativa de uma educação muito mais abrangente. So, it's a great pleasure to have you here, and we're going to start dialoguing about your work, about C, which I just told is a new kind of education that based on the social, emotional, and ethical. But to start with, we would like to know a bit about your story. Tell us how you arrived in this work that you're doing now.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure, really an honor to be on this program with you. As you mentioned, that I'm from the Himalayas, from India, trained in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So I had a great opportunity, really a fortune, to study with the great masters, particularly with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. When I moved to the United States to pursue my graduate studies in interdisciplinary studies, looking at emotions and how they impact our health and well-being, it was His Holiness the Dalai Lama who came to Emory in 1998 to inaugurate a program. At the time, it was referred to as Emory-Tibet Partnership, a partnership with Emory University to facilitate sort of the cross-cultural exchange of ideas and thoughts, the wisdom, the understanding. It's really, that's what led to this great collaboration between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Emory University for the last 20-some years of in kind of the academic field to see what can be brought from Western traditions to Tibetan traditions, what the Tibetan tradition can complement to the modern understanding. And the C learning, which is social, emotional, and ethical learning, is a culmination of that 20 years of academic collaboration between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Emory University.
It's very interesting when you start making this link between the Tibetan culture and the Eastern culture as a whole, and the Western culture. And you, as I have been seeing, the Dalai Lama always likes to bring in science and all the research that's being done in the present moment, involving neuroscience and the relation between meditation and well-being. So I think it's very interesting to bring science as a help to understand how things work, how meditation actually can improve the skills that one has, through meditation and all kinds of practices that in the East are very common, but in the West are something relatively new.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he's really has been so concerned about the future of our world, right? For the last 30, 40 years, he has been meeting with the scientists, educationists, health professionals from all walks of life to really understand, that how we can ensure the flourishing, not just survival, the flourishing of the humanity. And what he realized is that it's not, although religions have great place in our society, all over the world, but it's not the religion. It is the spirituality, basic human values, not religion. That's what we need to bring in our lives, that needs to permeate in our culture. And that can happen through education. And so that's why His Holiness's number one focus in life has been to promote basic human values, not religion. That he says that he is one of the 7 billion human beings on this planet, and as as a member of these 7 billion human beings, his first and kind of foremost commitment is to help promote basic human values like kindness, compassion, how to be more mindful, how to have better, emotion, kind of awareness of our emotions and manage our emotions better, how we can relate to each other, work with each other, how we can collaborate and cooperate, in a family, in a community, in a nation or the world. And these are the kind of the skills, like the emotional intelligence, social intelligence, this systems intelligence that you think about. That's what, when you really inculcate in your life, or begin to kind of embody, that shapes how you respond to people, how you respond to your own ups and downs, how you respond to the situations in the world, whether it concerns you, just yourself, your family, or as large as the kind of the human family, our globe as at large.
It's interesting that in the West we have concentrated very much in a kind of education that's very intellectual, and the emotional sometimes is forgotten. Something more or less recent, the emotional education, like I know that Daniel Goleman is also participating in this new endeavor to create education that's more wholesome, that includes the emotional, the ethical, includes mindfulness. But in the West, this is very new, and is this effort that the Dalai-lama is doing to create a new type of education that encompasses all aspects of human learning is very important. And I know the Dalai-lama, right now, he's very concerned with the young people who have been reading and participating also in his campaign of the compassion revolution that the Dalai Lama is promoting throughout the world. And this is very interesting because the campaign is geared to the young people. He thinks the young people are the ones that can change the world. I think this is very important. And if you have a kind of education that prepares the young people for this new world that's coming soon, where we're going to have a lot of difficulties due to the climate changes and global heating and things like this. The young people have a very important role for our future.
You are absolutely right. The need for what sometimes people call soft skill or the non-cognitive skills, the human element, if you will, human, what makes us human. These skills, I think the importance of these skills has been recognized for last at least 30 years or so. So there has been a movement called social emotional learning, or SEL, and there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of schools implementing social emotional learning in education. And social emotional learning comes with those 5 basic kind of competencies, or the abilities, as they call. It's basically about being self-aware, self-management, or the emotional management, social skills, like the empathy, and the the right decision or the responsible decision making. So this has been going for some time now. I think the very kind of the people who help shape the social emotional learning field, for example, Dr. Daniel Goleman, as you mentioned, he has really kind of shaped this field through his writings of emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and other books. They recognize, that like Dr. Goleman, together with Peter Senge from MIT, they wrote a book called Triple Focus. In that, they mention that we need to complement social emotional learning field with some very important other skills. For example, he says that next step in social emotional learning is attention training. Attention training, how do you train? We can talk about importance of training, but how do you train? How does that help, in terms of then how that translates into kind of your impulse control, cognitive control, that had, and these are the kind of the skills that how it can help our children, I mean us and the young people, how to navigate their lives in kind of very tumultuous kind of world that we are living in today. And then there are other elements like compassion. Daniel Goleman talks about compassion should be the next, the major kind of element in the SEL programs. And he says that, this should be actually the state of the art in education, but most programs are missing today.
It's very interesting that now we know that this kind of values, human values, can be taught, and this helps for the children, the students to grow, to flourish in meditation, in mindfulness, attention. Is something that can help also a lot. I have been reading about several practices in different schools, especially in the schools that have been involved with this program, that the results are fantastic. The children, even small children, can learn to meditate. So this is quite amazing. People thought this was just for grown-ups, but it's a revolution of teaching mindfulness to students at the early age. Well, we're going to have now a short interval.
Sure.
Vamos dar agora um pequeno intervalo e nós estamos aqui conversando com o professor Lobsang Negi, que é um tibetano que está visitando o Brasil agora e está nos falando sobre esse fantástico aprendizado que envolve o social, emocional e o ético. Voltamos daqui a pouco, fiquem conosco. Estamos de volta com o nosso Papo Supren. Hoje nós estamos entrevistando o professor Lobsang Tenzin Negi, que que mora atualmente nos Estados Unidos, trabalha na Universidade de Emory e vem desenvolvendo um trabalho fantástico há 20, 30 anos, inspirado nos ensinamentos tibetanos do Dalai-lama. E ele está trazendo, junto com um grupo de cientistas e outros estudiosos, uma verdadeira revolução na educação. E esse ano, em Nova Delhi, foi lançado esse programa que eles chamam de C-Learning, aprendizado CEE, que quer dizer aprendizado social, emocional e ético. So I would like to know a bit more about this program, the C-Learning. What are the bases of C-Learning, and what's the main contribution of this program?
Thank you for asking that question. So C-Learning, Social, Emotional and Ethical Learning, as I mentioned, is a program developed at Emory University. It's a culmination of over 20 years of academic collaboration between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Emory University. Now, the C-Learning itself, it falls within the umbrella of what's known as Social Emotional Learning, or SEL, sometimes people call it. And the SEL has been here for last 30 years or so, and in thousands of schools some version of SEL is there. There are hundreds of different, or dozens of different curricula based on kind of basic framework of social emotional learning. Now, the C learning complements the existing social emotional learning field with a number of new, very innovative, very kind of science, based, or the research based, if you will, incorporating best practices into the academic, field today. For example, the C learning incorporates attention training, the very systematic way of cultivating attention. C learning also is grounded in compassion, and so it provides a systematic way of cultivating and expanding compassion. It also incorporates like this trauma and resiliency informed practices, because today we know that our children are facing unprecedented kind of level of stress, and sometimes, of course, these are very traumatic as well, and how they can learn in school if they are unable to bounce back from certain adversities that they are going through. So the trauma-informed resiliency, the models are very kind of crucial part of this program, and then we implement in that. C learning also incorporates the systems thinking, which is a very important part. If our children were to conduct themselves or respond to the situation, the world, in a meaningful, in a healthy way, it will require them learning or utilizing their systems intelligence to see any given situation from a broader perspective, in this system perspective. So, and then an ethical engagement, that these are all geared towards these different various skills are geared towards helping children or the adults develop these inner dispositions that will naturally facilitate in the right decision making about responding to the situations in a healthy and meaningful way.
It's interesting that from what you say, you probably believe that compassion can be taught, or perhaps you can create the conditions where compassion will flourish from within. Because I understand that violence that we can see in the world today is due basically to this lack of emotional learning, of the possibilities that open when you try to convey that compassion and cooperation is possible, and it's the natural way of being. So how is it? How do you teach compassion? How do you teach the children to be ethical, for instance?
That's a really wonderful question. Compassion, I think that first of all, I think we need to understand what compassion is. So often people think that compassion is just doing something, like that. Compassion is fundamentally an attitude. It has, of course, the various components, but it's an emotional state. It is, you can see compassion as grounded in this sense of endearing connection with others. This meaningful connection, endearing, affectionate sense of connection with others. We know today that how many people are affected by the lack of finding this connection with even the family members. That much less about the neighbors or the people from the other part of the world. So I think that this sense of connection is proven so important for us as social beings. We are social beings. It's our primal need that we seek connection. When we lack or miss this sense of connection, we kind of wither. This sense of loneliness is a huge problem. I mean, in the United States, around the world,
yes.
That certainly in Brazil, I think that you can see the sense of loneliness is affecting many people. And compassion builds this sense of connection. And even in the medical field, if you look at, like that,
Yes.
how many people suffer from this sense of burnout, right? The feeling of burnout.
Yes.
When you look at the burnout, three main contributors to that. Number one is physical and emotional exhaustion. Second part is this sense of kind of perceived sense of lack of efficacy, that I'm not good enough. Third one is what they call the depersonalization, the seeing other people not as humans, but as objects and like that. That's where the compassion goes, right into kind of solving or the providing, solution to each of these three kind of problems. When you connect with this sense of connection with some others, you feel safe. You don't feel alone, and that actually helps you, deal with everyday stresses. So you don't get exhausted physically and emotionally that easily. Compassion also has to be for oneself, not just for others.
Yes.
And that is particularly important when we, encounter this ups and downs in life. Whether it's loss or whether we fail in something. Our tendency today is to just really blame ourselves, that you are a loser, you are no good. But rather, if we can see that this is a human condition, that everybody kind of has certain limitations, that we are not perfect beings, but we have tremendous capacity to always try to be better. So
Yes.
one failure does not define us. That one failure does not make you a failure, but rather it's just one, kind of the, failure that can be overcome. We can, always try harder. And then this, as I said, that we are living, in this global village today, that where we share even a small space with many different people from different backgrounds. We need to learn to how to see others as ourselves. We need to have this sense of belonging. We belong to this human family, and also to see how we are interconnected, interdependent.
Yes.
And these are the kind of the insights that you can introduce to children, not by telling them, but by having them come to this understanding themselves. So that's why the C learning incorporates the kind of the model of what is maybe called the constructivist approach to learning. That's where that instead of feeding them the information, a teacher is a guide, works with the students to help them see these kind of aspects of our life for themselves.
It's interesting you mentioned about loneliness, and we can see that depression is one of the the most common diseases that people have now, because sometimes they are surrounded by a lot of people, but they feel lonely because they don't connect to other people. And also, there's a lot of distraction due to social media, the computers and the mobile phones and so on. So people end up being very superficial, and the stress and this kind of life that's always running after something makes people feel very disconnected. And I think it's very important, this type of education that brings people together and show that the whole world has similar problems, that we can cooperate, we can do we can have compassion. And with compassion, I think trust comes along.
Exactly.
And this is something
and
that lacks a lot in our society.
Yeah.
Trust and cooperation. There's no cooperation if there's no trust.
Yes, exactly.
And it's interesting that meditation, mindfulness, and training for attention helps a lot the students. Perhaps you could develop a bit more about this skill that's so fundamental.
Yes, I think that you're absolutely right. That what we are seeing is unprecedented kind of the emotional outbreak today. The children, like adolescents, like ages 12 to 17, like that. Like I have the data from the United States, for example. In the United States, like up to 30% of adolescent in this group, age group 12 to 17, suffering from some kind of major episode of depression. 30% of girls, 20% of boys with the anxieties and like that, loneliness. So I think, what we need today is, along with the traditional kind of academic subjects, because those are very important. C-learning is not a substitute to the traditional education. It's very important. But so far, our traditional education has focused primarily on kind of building skills that concern about external development. What we need is to pair those kind of skills with inner development, because inner kind of development of this attention, for example, if someone does not have an awareness to notice when there's this impulse, for example, let's say to reach out to this, the iPad or the phone when there is a little buzz there, or to have some kind of drink or drug and like that. When there's an impulse, if they are not aware, and that little impulse can result into reaching out to drugs and then taking it, or to reaching out to the phone when you are trying to be studying and then getting distracted. So attention training, for example, just one example, is about being aware of our impulses and how to manage it. That alone can be a huge help for our children today.
Thank you. Well, we are about to end our program, so I thank you very much. But gostaria de comentar antes de finalizar o programa que esse C-Learning que foi lançado na Índia esse ano está sendo traduzido para vários idiomas, inclusive para o português. E ele começa na escola primária, né, básica, e vai chegar, hoje já chega até o ensino secundário, e no futuro vai estar também disponível para o nível universitário. Então, a União Planetária está envolvida nesse processo, né, de trazer o C-Learning aqui para o Brasil. Então, esperem que mais informações sobre isso serão disponibilizadas. So, I thank you very much for your presence here, for sharing all this information, and we hope we can work together.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Thank you.
Então, nós estamos encerrando aqui mais um Papo Supren. Fiquem conosco. Até a próxima.